We go to SB 10. Today is National Kindergarten Day. Today is National Kindergarten Day. We take SB 10, which provide for mandatory kindergarten attendance and requires for compulsory attendance kindergarten at age 5. SB 10 was brought by the chair. Basically, kindergarten is mandatory. It's not mandatory. Kindergarten is provided by every school system in the state of Louisiana, and it is required by every school system in the state of Louisiana, and most of our school districts in the state actually have kindergarten. Most of no, I'm gonna let y'all finish. All of the school districts in the states require or have school kindergarten, and we have about 2,800 kids who do not attend kindergarten in the state of Louisiana. This bill makes it mandatory, and that all kids across the state of Louisiana attend kindergarten. Early childhood education is a necessity in this state. Kid learn brain is developed the most between the ages of birth and 5 years of age, and this will basically give us an opportunity to take advantage of that. If there are any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. We'll take Senator Jackson first.
No questions, Mr. Chairman. I've got very little emails regarding non-support of this bill, but a number of emails regarding support. And I know this is your bill, but I wanted to say to you, thank you for bringing it. I want to be very transparent in this, that I didn't even realize as a legislator kindergarten was not mandatory. But in our school systems right now, we are pushing for early childhood education. I do want to clear up a misnomer with a number of my constituents that did email that homeschooling is still allowed, just like it's allowed for first, second, third, and fourth grade. Whatever measures or mechanisms you use to enroll your children in school traditionally are still allowed under this bill. I think it's vitally important. I wish we could get funding to require pre-K, honestly. But I thank you so much. You have brought a novel issue to me because I thought that it was mandatory, and I think it's extremely important.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Senator Jackson. Senator Abraham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had the same question as Senator Jackson on the home schools, which I know that's been clarified. Next question, which I asked you already, I've mentioned this to you, just wanted to make sure we're on the same page and get clarification that the current hours of a private kindergarten would apply to this bill. It doesn't say they would have that a private kindergarten would have to have 8 hours or whatever, a certain amount of hours to qualify as kindergarten. If they're a kindergarten now in a private school, the kindergarten now in a private school, those hours would apply to what they're doing currently. That's why I just wanted to make sure that that's clarifying.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. There are no other questions. There are individuals who wish to speak. Susan East Nelson, in support, who wish to speak.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and the committee. My name is Susan East Nelson. I'm the Executive Director of the Louisiana Partnership for Children and Families. In 2015, so a few years ago, we launched our platform for children, and this is one of the recommendations that we put in that platform. I think a lot of people are surprised to learn here that you don't have to appear in a school in Louisiana until you're 7 years old. And all of the data about early brain development, all of the evidence about those very valuable early years tells us that kindergarten being mandatory is a big step toward helping children thrive. Today, we know that kindergarten also provides access to healthy meals, developmental screenings, a whole host of things that can help us reach children at a very young age before whatever developmental problem they may have becomes something that cannot be fixed. So, Senator Fields, I appreciate you bringing this legislation. We really do. And this is something that has been a long time request of the folks at the Louisiana Partnership. So we absolutely support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Susan East Nelson. Also, I'd like to offer up an amendment. I did have a conversation with Mr. Mills, and there was a concern, and I would like to address this concern, and that is with homeschool. This amendment will basically address the homeschool issue. It allow homeschoolers to homeschool their kids at kindergarten, and so I would offer up that amendment. Did we pass out the amendment yet? Mm-hmm. All right. So I would move to adopt that amendment. Any objections to the adoption of the amendment? Hearing no objection, that amendment is adopted. The amendment basically would allow families who homeschool their kids to homeschool their kids, could homeschool their kids at the kindergarten. All right, any other questions? There are no other questions. Bridget Nealon, in support, do not wish to speak. Ethan Malonzone, in support, do not wish to speak. Cindy Bishop, in support, do not wish to speak. Michael Olivier, in support, do not wish to speak. Jim Harris, in support, do not wish to speak. Kelly Melende, in support, do not wish to speak. Richard Hartley, in support, do not wish to speak. J.P. Morrell, in support, do not wish to speak. Janet Polk, with the Louisiana School Board Association, in support, do not wish to speak. Michael Falk, with the Louisiana School Board Association, to provide information only. Sarah here we go. Sarah, in support, do wish to speak. Sarah, we're going to get this name right now. With the Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools.
Sarah Vandergriff.
Vandergriff. All right.
Yeah.
All right. That's real easy. Vandergriff. All right.
So Sarah Vandergriff with the Louisiana Association of Public Charter Schools. We just wanted to be on the record that our schools very much support this in the sense that any message the state can send to parents, the importance of early education, is supported. There's too many really sad results coming out in education, as many of you all know, as to our early literacy. From K through third grade, we barely are meeting 50% of our kids reading on school level. And so just sending that message out to parents that kindergarten, it's important. It's that first building block step. I will say some of my schools did have concern of the way the bill reads. It talks about a first grade reading screener. That seems to sound sort of like a high stakes test. They're not sure if that's necessarily appropriate, but also the Department of Ed is currently revamping an entire K-2 accountability system for the first time ever. So we have an early ed accountability system for all the early childhood programs, and then we have accountability systems from 3 to 12. So for the first time ever, we'll soon implement K through 2, which will be heavily influenced on reading programs. There's a current pilot program right now in the schools that would be modeled afterwards. So we just want to make sure that you all are aware of the K2 issues that are about to come up in the new program, and to make sure if there's any sort of first grade reading, high stakes sort of tests or whatnot, that's coordinated with the Department of Ed as part of their overall K2 accountability plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Mizell.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And this is my internal conflict. Besides that, it's the chairman's bill. That's the big conflict. Is that, I mean, I'm a big proponent of expanding early childhood. It's voluntary. It's not mandatory. And my son, and we all are here because of our personal experiences driving how we think. Mm-hmm. My son's entire soccer team went to T1. They'd been in kindergarten. They gave them another year in T1. I don't know if many schools have T1. I don't know if that's an option for most kids that are in kindergarten and not ready for it. And they're in that. I'm sharing. So what would you say to me?
Well, I will have to speak first for my organization, where we are charter schools. So most of my schools apply or have kindergarten, and they offer it. So coming from a school's perspective, they're like, come on, let's have as many babies as we can for early education. I don't know, to the point about the first grade readiness, readiness tests and their concerns about the high stakes for that T1 and that transition year, which you would normally hear about more of like the 8th grade, you're not ready for 9th grade. So I cannot speak to that, to your specific question. And for other people's concerns as to whether or not it's mandatory or volunteer, I feel like those who are with the homeschooling program are probably better advocates to address that issue. But my family are all early ed, pre-K, and kindergarten teachers. So from my individual family hat on, I would say the more we can send a message as a state to families that this is important. And I know that there's many options already available, including with homeschooling. Maybe there's parameters in place for folks around what happens in that homeschooling program for their kindergartners that people can find amenable. But the problem is we're just starting grade years behind. And I've sat through too many education committees with the early ed folks that says you actually got to get kids by 3 years old because they go into the science of what's happening with their brain development. So I just say from a state, for a public program, for the state to send the message that this is important, and the state is putting its money where its mouth is. You're providing additional money to make sure that all kids have access to it. And I also say I have a coworker from the Lake Charles area who to this day gets very teared up by the fact that she was part of a family that held her back for kindergarten. Her first day was first grade, and she remembers as a first grader of feeling that she was different, that she didn't know how to read and write, she didn't know her ABCs, that she was different from her other classmates. And she has a running joke within her family for the one brother that did go to kindergarten, the whole family, and he's like now like a NASA scientist or something. So they joke about what would have happened if we all went to kindergarten.
I never went to kindergarten. I didn't know I was missing anything, but apparently I was. So.
Well, I think there's just a difference. I mean, every family comes with different circumstances. And I would say too, like my mom held us. My mom was a former teacher too, and held us, and we learned at the home from early age. But not every family does that. And so the concern will be more for, do we send a message of if it's optional and mandatory? And then I feel like the way the laws are set up for the folks that have concern over there's mandatory, that there are options that you don't physically have to go to a brick and mortar.
Right. So, and I probably should ask the author, but what if the student goes into like a pre-K 4 or second year, if he's not mature enough to go to kindergarten? Would that qualify? Would that qualify?
Say that again.
If a parent, and this may not be the right way to do it, but if a parent felt their child wasn't ready for kindergarten, but we're going to put him into a second year of pre-K 4 so that he's getting readiness but he's just not, the maturity's not there for a full-on kindergarten. They're not ignoring the fact, like you're saying. Nobody wants to ignore literacy. I mean, if I could mandate everybody put books in their home, I would. I can't mandate that. But we can talk about it.
Okay.
Like, there's other people besides me that could better suit your questions, Senator Mizell. But anyway, thank you for your consideration, and just want to relay
Thank you.
the
Thank you
support
so
and
much.
concerns from the charter school community. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, Barry Irvin from Cable, Peter Martinez from the Louisiana Charter Schools in support, do not wish to speak. David Zoller, Baton Rouge Area Coalition, Coalition, I guess, in support, do not wish to speak. Terrence Lockett, in support, do not wish to speak. Cynthia Posey, in support, do not wish to speak.
That's
Marcus
for
Thomas,
first
in
grade,
support,
yeah.
do not wish to speak. Kelly Lockett, in support, do not wish to speak. Rodney Braxton, in support, do not wish to speak. And Peter Brown, in support, do not wish to speak. Jesse Leger, in opposition, would like to speak with the Homeschool Louisiana. And we have, let's see, anybody else? And we have Dale Hofftower in opposition with the Louisiana Family Forum. All right, please introduce yourself. You may
Good morning,
proceed.
Senator Fields. Jessie
morning.
Leger. I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for Homeschool Louisiana. We represent homeschoolers all across the state of Louisiana and have been doing so for over 30 years. I'd like to bring to your attention the 2009 Louisiana Children's Code, which in part says that it is the parent's responsibility to make decisions regarding where and with whom the child shall reside. The educational, moral, ethical, and religious training of the child is up to parents. And we think it needs to stay with parents and stay optional. You mentioned earlier there's about 2,300 students that we're talking about across the entire state. That is a small fraction of students, and there are unintended consequences, the largest of which is what Senator Mizell just brought up with our youngsters, typically boys, that turn 5 September 30th and now have to be in full-day kindergarten. In my community in St. Tammany, they're eliminating transitional first grade. So you've got a 5-year-old who's not quite ready for kindergarten, he's not mature enough, and really should be outside digging in the dirt and climbing trees, and is now in full 5-day kindergarten. And then going into first grade in my community, he's expected to be reading when he enters first grade, have all of his math facts through 10 down solid and counting to 100. And some of them just aren't ready for that. Just like children walk and talk and crawl and sit up at different ages, children have a range of when they learn how to read. Some as early as 3 or 4, some, like my middle child, not until 9. And had he been in a classroom setting where he was told that you're not reading by 5 or 6, then there's a deficiency there. He would have been, he'd have been a whole alphabet soup of diagnoses, I'm sure. But he just needed some more time. And he had that time, and now, you know, he's 22, he's married, he's supporting his wife, doing great. But that would not have been his story had he been mandatory to go to kindergarten. And I know you have provision in there for non-public schools. For homeschoolers, the way it will affect us is that we will have to report to the state 2 years earlier than we do now. And just having, it's just another government overreach, which we're not super happy about. I also did some research into what other states are doing. There are 11 states across our nation that have mandatory kindergarten at 5 years old, or mandatory compulsory ed at 5. And so you would think that the majority of them, if early education that young is what brings scores up and their education system should be doing better. And I did find Massachusetts, well, they're at 6. They're the first in the nation in education. We're sitting at 49, which is exciting. I thought we were 50, but that's New Mexico. That has 5-year-old kindergarten. And it runs the gamut. Connecticut has 5-year-old kindergarten. They're second in the nation, but we've got number 42, number 49, 50, well, that's us, 49, 50, 47, 43, and then 23, 31. They all have 5-year-old kindergarten. So they're not seeing the results that you would expect that young. Other research shows that little guys like that, like I said, they need to be playing, running around outside, and using their big motor skills. Even now, infants are sitting in car seats and swings, and they're not mobile and developing those big motor skills that we did running around in the neighborhood until the lights came on, right? Kids these days don't do that. We more often put them in the backseat of the car and go to some educational thing and whatever that looks like and think that we're doing a service. But we're really damaging our kids and not giving them time to play. And mandating that all 5-year-olds are in a classroom all day long is going to be detrimental. The other concern that we have is that it's going to further cripple our special education classrooms. In St. Tammany Parish right now, 75% of the special ed classes are not, they're vacant. And so we already have a gap in that, and now you're going to have these 5-year-olds that if they would have just been given another year to mature, they wouldn't have problems reading. They'd be doing okay. But now they're that the dyslexia rates and all of those things that we think are going to just expand. Research shows that the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain don't always communicate. They start kind of talking to each other between 3 and 9 or so. And so we have these little guys and it's nothing to do with their ability. It's just that they're physically not developed enough in their brain for the right side and left side to be talking to each other. And you start teaching those little children to read, they memorize the words, they memorize the shapes of the words, and they guess. But by the time, then you have the ones that are taught phonics and things like that, and allowed to develop kind of at their own pace naturally. By 4th grade, they're kind of on the same par, but those that were allowed to develop on their own timetable are still interested in learning. They still love learning, and they are better readers, and they comprehend better. They don't have the comprehension difficulties that the other ones learn when the brain's not developed. And we can't do anything about that. You can't make their brain develop faster. It just is going to be on this, whatever timetable. Like I said, they sit at different ages, they crawl and walk and talk at different ages, they go through puberty at different ages, and they learn how to read at different ages. So that's our big concern. We would like it to remain voluntary. The majority of Louisiana families do send their children to kindergarten, and we just want to see the state allow us the option as parents to decide what's best for our children. Thank you for your time.
Well, the argument that 90% of the brain development is between birth and 5.
Well, as a mom of 5 kids, I can tell you that my teenagers' brains aren't fully developed till they're 25. I've witnessed that firsthand many times.
All right.
So there's a lot that goes on,
Yes,
but the
ma'am.
brain is going to develop better, and when we give them that room to move. If we had play kindergarten like Finland, I'd be all for it, but that's not what it looks like. It looks like sitting little guys and gals in desks and giving them worksheets and requiring them to memorize information that they really just need to be playing,
Yes,
because they
ma'am.
learn best through play.
Thank you very much.
So do I.
All right. Senator Jackson.
Thank you. Question is this, is there any harm that mandating kindergarten causes a child?
The harm would be, like I said, you have the ones that are not ready, they're not mature enough, and now parents don't have a family that can't homeschool for whatever reason or chooses not to, puts their 5-year-old that they would have redshirted and held back another year in kindergarten at 5, and now in St. Tammany, and I'm not sure what it's in your community or not, the transitional first is going away. That's not an option anymore. So
And when you say a child is not ready, explain to me What do you mean by that?
They're just immature, a young 5-year-old that just turned 5 at the end of September and isn't ready for the academic environment that kindergarten is today, because kindergarten doesn't look like
I guess
what
I
it
think
did.
a little differently, because if a student is immature and not ready academically, I think that denotes that it's time to put that 5-year-old in school, whether it be homeschool or by some other means, so that they don't get further behind. Because when I think about the word immature, it denotes a child that has not developed at the same pace as children his or her age. And so when I hear the word immature, I'm thinking as a lawmaker, as a aunt, as a former educator, that signals that that child not only needs some type of formal educational training, but they need a little extra. Because
I hear you. I
most
think we
children
just
are in some type of formal setting, be it homeschool or be it enrolled in a brick and mortar building at 4 years old. So to me, the argument that's being brought forward about a child being immature further avails to the fact that at that point, that child not only needs some type of formal training, they need extra tutoring and extra care to get them to the point of being at the same pace of other children their age. And that's my major concern when I hear the argument that children are not mature enough. If that be the case, when does that child catch up? When do we catch that child who has not matured at the same pace academically or behavioral-wise as their cohorts, and ensure that they do? Because I think that if we recognize that a child is immature and we do nothing about it, then that child
Suggesting
continues.
doing nothing about it, Senator Jackson, I'm suggesting that that's up to the parents to decide when their child is ready to attend school.
Okay,
and
so the
ready
child is
to-
mandated in first grade. So let me tell you when it becomes, I'm going to be honest and I'm not being insensitive, when it becomes the teacher and the school system's responsibility. When an immature child that hasn't had some type of intervention or formal education comes into first grade, and that first grade teacher is then graded based on that child's performance.
And that's another conversation that we can have a different day.
Well, I mean, it's
But
law.
it is,
I mean, it's law right now.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at what Senator
so-
Fields is doing in accordance with law.
As I understand the law now, to go into first grade, a student has to pass an assessment. And so then why is that not?
No, it's
what's the
mandated.
problem?
They have to go in first
Right,
grade.
they have
The
to pass it.
assessment
So if they're
is
not
to
ready, then they
determine-
would go to kindergarten at 7.
No, actually, it's not. The assessment is to determine the grade level and the student's plan and what's needed for the child, is the way I understand. I may be wrong, but that's what the assessment is. But when it becomes the school's responsibility, when it becomes the teacher's responsibility, when it becomes a state responsibility, is when that child enters first grade and he or she is still academically and behaviorally immature. But that teacher, that principal, the staff is obligated at that point, because of the school grade, because of the teacher's, I'm at a loss for the teacher's evaluation, to ensure that that child performs at the same level as a child who's availed himself to some type of formal education in pre-K4, some type of formal education in kindergarten. So I understand that it's a parent's choice, and let me tell you what I really believe the biggest choice is for parents, because studies have been real clear. And Senator Fields asked this question, and I sat for a second. The studies are clear that most of what a child learns, he or she learns in at the developmental stage from 3 to 5. Now, I agree with you that a teenager is still learning, but the study doesn't say they learn everything. What the studies show is they learn the majority of what they're going to learn during that time. And so when I look at the studies, when I look at where Louisiana is, when I look at what the teachers are required to do, what happens is, and I'm going to speak for the educators out there, what happens is this: an educator's in a classroom with 15 or 20 students. He or she has 15 to 18 who have availed themselves to some type of formal, whether it be homeschool or I think they have online school now. I know it's a variety of things, training. And they are formally trained at that point in first grade. But there are 3 or 4 students who haven't, or maybe 1. And that student begins to feel like he or she is not good enough. because everyone else in that class has had some type of formal training. I truly think, and hear my heart on this, that it does a child a disservice, because at some point at 6 years old, they're going to enter school with other students. They're generally going to be the only student in that class that hasn't had formal training, hasn't been able to develop friendships with their classmates. And at that point, they turn from being emotionally immature to being fully emotionally and behaviorally and academically immature, as well as they turn to being an outsider. And that, to me, is the decision that happens. And the real choice for parents or not, is whether you put your child in the brick or mortar school, whether you put your child in an academic setting that's online, or whether you homeschool. And I understand that to be a strong choice of parents, and I support it. I'm even leaning more toward some of the charter schools, especially during the early childhood developmental phases, because of the needs of children, where I think we kind of get into the state's obligation to make sure every child has a fair chance is on this bill. Because the bottom line is, at some point, yes, your child has an assessment, and then let's say a parent decides to hold them back, which is what happens, because a parent does have a choice when that first grade assessment hits to hold the child back into kindergarten. You have that chance in 4th grade and 5th grade. But then what happens is, let's say they don't pass the assessment, and let's say it's a choice to hold them back, then you got a 7-year-old or a 6-year-old sitting with 5-year-olds. And I think at that point, they still feel like an outsider. And I respect parent choice. That's why I talked about parental choice and everything that's available. But I want to caution everyone, is why I'm supporting this bill, is at some point that child will feel like an outsider. He or she would have missed a lot of stuff and be that, because it's 210 kids. So you're going to probably be the only child in that classroom that's academically behind, behaviorally as far as interacting with other students behind. And that is my strong concern for it. And that's why I'm very supportive of this bill, because being in an educational setting, I've seen it happen. And I'll tell you this, absent a parent having the ability to pay for extreme tutoring and social skills, that child usually, when he or she hits 4th grade and the leap hits, is still behind. And so that is my concern for the children of Louisiana, what holding them back does. Now, if a parent has availed a child to kindergarten and pre-K, and that child is still not able to comprehend the lesson, then I understand you have to hold them back, because you want to build a strong character and strong academic character in a child. But I think at some point you single them out. Whether you intend to or not, it happens. And their social skills are really impaired at that point. And so that is my concern, and that's why I'm supporting the bill. And I would ask every parent to consider that, and to consider the burden you place on teachers in our educational system when that child has no formal education, and they're the one child or the 2 children sitting in 1st grade. And that teacher is trying to teach at that level, but then has 2 or 3 students. And so basically you have a divided classroom. And I don't think that's good for any child's morale, that they sit in the classroom as less than anyone else academically and behaviorally. That's my strong, ask, that parents consider that.
All right, have you concluded your
Yes, I'm
comments?
sorry. I know they were long, but I'm passionate about education. Y'all shouldn't have put me on here, because I'm passionate about education.
All right, you may
My name is Dale Hoffpower with Louisiana Family Forum. Our president, Gene Mills, would love to have been here today, but he's honoring his old football coach, the passing of Kenny Guillotte, so that's where he is this morning.
please give Gene my regards. It would have been good to see him today.
Yeah. I think we'll have a chance to continue the conversation.
Yeah, we will.
So.
We will.
It's already been mentioned, we recognize the preamble to the Louisiana Children's Code, where the parents should make the decisions, and the role of the state in the family is limited. So current law allows parental discretion as to when the child is ready for the structured educational setting. It's already been mentioned, parents also currently have the option to choose kindergarten or a readiness assessment. Louisiana Family Forum has worked with Senator Fields and your staff to clarify the parental authority in the bill, especially the homeschool part, and we appreciate that. Thank you so much for addressing and having the conversations and addressing our concerns. We just maintain that without the opt-out, we still have concerns about it. I think it comes down to just philosophical of who has the authority, and if it's a balance, if it's the state versus parents, we're gonna promote the parental authority, parental discretion. We recognize some children do need to be in a structured environment. We just don't know which ones they are. So if efforts could be focused on that and it not be mandated every family, every child, that's what our preferences are, and we do look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you very much for your comments. We have a few more cards. We also have, who do not wish to speak, Jamie Pope, representing myself. And we have Cindy Bishop, who is in support with the Child Care Association of Louisiana, and Dr. Tia Mills with LAE in support, and George Swift with SWLA Alliance in support do not wish to speak. All right, members, you've heard the testimony of the bill. What's your pleasure?
I move favorable.
Senator Jackson moves that Senate Bill 10 be reported favorable as amended. And Senator Mizell object. Senator Secretary will call the roll. If you're for the bill, you will vote yes. If you're against the bill, you will vote no.
Senator Jackson?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Abraham?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Mills?
Yes.
Yes. Senator Mizell? No. Senator Talbert? Yes. Senator White?
Yes.
Yes. We have 5 yeas and 1 nay.
5 yeas, 1 nay, and the bill is reported as amended.
I make comment?
Senator White.
Just
Oops.
as I understand it, as it's amended, it doesn't take all the rights away from the parent. If you still want to homeschool, you can still homeschool. If you still,
Yes, sir.
under every circumstance, would that child have to go to a kindergarten? Or
Yeah.
get a certificate?
Yes, yes. The child would have to go to kindergarten or homeschool.
It delineates private, public, and I guess homeschool.
Right. That's right. You would have to go to kindergarten, or you would homeschool your kid, but the kindergarten would be private or public.
Okay. I mean, there was a lot of testimony. That's why I tell everybody I hate this committee. Everybody has kids. Everybody has an opinion about education. It's like I could have stayed in bed this morning. But we have to make decisions. You know, there's no easy decisions in this committee. I admire you, Mr. Chairman. But, I mean, I had 3 kids. I got 4 grandchildren. They're all different. They all learn at a different level. They all, I have an 18-month-old. It seems like she's a genius. I have a 2-year-old, almost 3-year-old grandson, and he's catching up. And we never all learn the same, and education is a tough issue. That's why I guess this committee haunts me. Thank you.
Please remind me that he's been serving on it for 12 years.
And they keep putting them back on.